Hello, horror fans. Welcome to That Reminds Me Of. This episode, we are talking about The Haunting of Bly Manor.
This is the show where we talk about new release films and TV, in this case TV, and then we dive into the films and TV and books and all that stuff that we're reminded of. Just a warning, it's spoiler heavy, so if that bothers you, go and watch the show. Otherwise, listen on.
And this is our first episode, really, that is about TV, isn't it, Baron? TV series.
Yeah, that's right. It's not something that we've done yet. So, and the last few episodes, there's been a bunch of these just new things for us that we're trying.
We are intrepid explorers.
That's right.
This is our latest one into the horror genre, which is close to your heart.
Absolutely. And I think we both loved the first season from Mike Flanagan. Director, creator Mike Flanagan made The Haunting of Hill House first, last year, on Netflix. And we both were raving about how great a show that was. So when The Haunting of Bly Manor, the second series in the anthology thingo that he's doing, came up, it was like a no-brainer. We have to see it.
Yeah, so excited. I loved Haunting of Hill House. What I didn't know much about was Mike Flanagan himself and the rest of his work. But I'm guessing, we haven't discussed this, but I'm guessing you would be quite familiar with his work being a horror aficionado.
I am. I've been watching his journey for a little while. And I think it started off with the fact that he's adapted a couple Stephen King stories. And I'm a big Stephen King fan. So I was intrigued from the get-go. And I think the film that I heard about first was Gerald's Game, which is a really nasty, twisted book from Stephen King. And he did the adaptation of that, which appeared on Netflix as well. And I've seen it. I think it's got some issues as a film, but I think since then I've been watching him and went and saw some of the films before that as well. And what I really respect is that this is a guy that's going after horror in a big way. And he's trying a lot of different things. He's not just rolling out the sort of standard Blumhouse horror films. He's kind of thinking about what he wants to do next. And The Haunting of Hill House is a perfect example of that.
And he's not just starting at horror and then maturing into real film. He's maturing in his lane, isn't he?
Absolutely, that's right. Which is a thing you hear about, isn't it? You know, people start with horror because you can do a low budget horror film, and everyone loves. Well, a lot of filmmakers love the genre for the kind of low budget, just get it made aspect of it. But you know, he's not one of those guys. He's horror through and through.
Well, we've got so much to cover, so let's just jump into synopsis and get that out of the way, and then just start talking about this 9-episode extravaganza.
Absolutely. And it's your turn, Doc, so you can take it away.
The Haunting of Bly Manor starts with a young woman, Danny. She gets a job as an au pair or a governess of these two orphan children in a grand, stately country estate, Bly Manor. And she goes there, and we know it's a ghost story from the start, really. All strange manner of things start happening at this house. They're seeing the usual ghosts everywhere. There are a cast of characters at the house, a gardener, a cook, a governess. They're all having weird, ghosty experiences, memory kind of experiences. But the main two, perhaps, are a guy called Peter Quint and the old governess, Rebecca Jessel.
That's right. Yes,
Rebecca Jessel. Those two characters, we in a series of flashbacks, we see that they had a bit of an affair, ended up both dying, and the main ones perhaps haunting the house. And the specific way they're haunting it is by getting into the little kids' bodies. It's a young boy and a young girl. So the little kids are kind of the vehicle for this haunting. So that's one big reveal, but then we go back in time and go into the whole history of how the house got haunted in the first place, and then we end in a typical kind of I don't know if it's typical. Let's not even talk about the ending. We'll get to the ending, but is that a setup that you can maybe expand on?
Yeah, no, that is really good. So I think compared to The Haunting of Hill House, we are now in the UK as opposed to the US, but they've for some reason kept an American lead as sort of she's the au pair you're talking about. The cast is made up of some old familiars from The Haunting of Hill House, plus some new characters or new actors, a little bit like the American Horror Story style of doing these anthology series. You'll see the same actors in different roles, and that's part of the fun of it, I suppose. Except I would say maybe one difference is that I think the actors that Mike Flanagan has taken from the first season through to the second are perhaps the weakest of all of the actors that he had the choice of bringing forward with him. Maybe they're his friends, I don't know. Like you've got the boy who's the kid in E.T., sorry, the man who was the boy in E.T. Is the same. He was the dad in The Haunting of Hill House, and now he's the estranged uncle who won't go to the house and is basically putting all the money into looking after these two kids. And really the manor is just a way to look after these two children, isn't it? Like the whole thing with all the help is set up just for the two kids.
Yeah, it is. It's peculiar. And his character was peculiar.
Very.
It threw me off. So I'm not sure if that was a good or a bad thing, but just the simple fact that the kid from E.T. was in both series, and because he was that, the patriarch figure in both. And then you had him mirrored by Carla Gugino. Is that how you pronounce her?
Yeah. Who was the wife in the first season?
Who was the wife in the first one.
Yeah.
So that made me think from the outset that there was some significance to that, and that there really was a through line between the two.
Yes. Interesting.
And it took quite a while for me to shake that, and maybe that's a good red herring in a way, but maybe it's sort of an unnecessary one.
So there's so many of those little things that I want to talk about, those details, and some of them we've already alluded to a little bit. But before we do, I just want to know, Doc, what did you think? Like overall, compared to The Haunting of Hill House, which I've already said we both loved, what was your feeling about The Haunting of Bly Manor? How did it stand up to you?
Overall, nowhere near as well as Hill House. That's the start. However, I thought it was had several really great high points. So it took me on there were different directors and writers through the series, and I thought that was quite sort of apparent, and I just liked some of it a lot more than others. You?
That's a great point. So I was bitterly disappointed with this season compared to...
Oh, bitterly.
Yes,
okay.
I was really annoyed by it. Not annoyed's the wrong word. I just came in with such high expectations, and this season let me down in so many ways. But that being said, like you're saying, there were two standout episodes for me, and there were a couple moments in particular that I loved. I thought were really clever ideas, and I thought they were handled really well. And then other episodes just shat me to tears. I could barely get through them. So it was a real mixed bag for me. And I felt like I think I've diagnosed a couple of the reasons why I think it falls a little flat. So I'm looking forward to getting into that with you.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. We've got exactly the same take on it all, and it'll be interesting to see if our pros and cons are the same.
Okay, so let's just step back for a second. My cat's just doing the cat thing again, just making noise all over the place. Just ignore that.
I'm thrilled that it's your cat and not mine,
God.
so she'll start soon, no doubt.
I know. Let's step back for a second, because I just want to go back to the very beginning of this show, and it's the bookend of this season. It starts off with Carla Gugino. I'm probably saying that horribly wrong, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, you said it one way, I said it another, so between us we'll get it right.
Yeah. The mother from Hill House, and now we discover at the very end, which is almost impossible to tell by looking at her, that she's actually the gardener that you've met in the season, and come to kind of love. Like that's one of the characters that I sort of appreciated.
Agree.
And then, and she's telling this whole story, and she's doing it for some reason at the wedding. This is another spoiler for everyone. At the wedding of little Flora from the show, who's now grown up and is getting married. And for some reason, she's decided to tell a 9-hour ghost story at a wedding the night before. the night before to this crowd of people who, a couple of them, at least 3 of them, were part of the actual story and have somehow forgotten about it, or at least the kids have. And there's just a bizarre... I just found that sort of that setup and the voiceover just to be a really bizarre setup, and didn't love any of that. And I don't think it really added a lot. I would have actually much preferred to just be dropped in 1987 in the English countryside with a American au pair driving up for the first day of a new job.
Well, I think that's inherited from the book, which is Turn of the Screw by Henry James. So that the device of putting it within the narrative of telling a ghost story, which is an oft-used device, I suppose, isn't it, in this type of genre?
Yes.
But I agree, it didn't quite work, and particularly at the end, I was unconvinced as to whether they really are the same people. It seems so implausible that they would be the same crowd that I just couldn't really believe it. I took it as, I don't know how I took it. It kind of spoiled the season to me, that last episode.
It was the final straw for me. Like that, when that happened, and then they did this weird, the thing where you show a room full of people and then one at a time, you sort of flash over them with their younger version of themselves holding the same glass and smiling the same way, and then you cut back to them, you go, oh, okay, that's who that person is.
Oh, that's who he is, yeah.
Oh God, it was just, that for me was awful. I couldn't take it, and it felt so unnecessary. And also, like, for one, the sort of Indian English gent who plays Owen looks, the young version of him, he's maybe late 30s, 40. The supposedly 20-year later version of him is maybe like 45, and they look nothing like nothing alike. It just blew my mind. Like, why wouldn't you just age that guy up, Just put a bit of makeup on him to make him look like he's 10 years older, and there you go, you're good.
Well, the answer to that is because then it gives it away from the start. But still the point is valid, that why not get someone who could conceivably be the same guy?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, have we started with the worst part, or do you have other little awful Easter eggs packed in there?
I have some more. Now, I'm just going to jump in with why I think the show doesn't work. I'm just going to do it because what I think doesn't work about the show. Let's put it the right way.
Yes.
So that aside, that was an awful little detail for me. But what I really found to be an issue was that it spends the first 4 episodes of a 9-part season basically with backstory and the promise of scares to come. However, there are no scares. Like, it really just it just drags its feet, and it dives straight into the melodrama and the backstory of these characters. And every episode, one after the other, is just more of the same. And you're waiting for what was given to you in the first season, like right up front, just really scary moments and high stakes right from the beginning, And I just think where this season went wrong compared to the first season is that they could have brought some of the action and the scares and the threat forward and had that peppered throughout episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than making you wait so long for the horror to really kick in.
Yeah, absolutely, times 100. I'd only say that I would have lived with it in that first half, because I was with it for the first half of the season for the most part, had it paid off, because you really felt like you were investing, didn't you? But yes, you did feel like it was going to pay off, and it didn't. It the complete opposite. Like, the air got taken out of it in the last half. Yeah,
it didn't get it. And what infuriated me was that there was this great concept of a dollhouse where you could see all of the ghosts in this house. Like, the little girl had made a little doll for each of them, and sometimes they would move, and you knew that meant the ghosts were on the move, or that something was going on in the house.
But no, it meant nothing at all. It's the twist.
Yeah. Right. It never goes anywhere. And then also, like, that doctor, for instance, there's a doctor character that's like a plague doctor with the full mask and the long nose, that great costume. And you see a little bit of him in like episode 1 or 2. Like you just catch him corner of frame, and yet nothing happens with that character. And like there's little hints in the dollhouse, like there's a child in the attic, and there's, you know, this sort of straw looking man, and you know, you think, oh, all these ghosts are going to pop out at different times, and you know, it's going to be filled with those great scenes that you got in the first season, where like one of the little girls or little boy is walking down the hallway and suddenly something creepy comes down from around the corner, you know, like, but none of that actually happened. That kind of blew my mind. It was all there. All the setup was there.
Yeah, and like the coronavirus doctor, he could have been on posters as the you know, the Scream or the It.
Yeah,
you know, like it's an iconic, cool thing. And when he came back and we saw how he died, I didn't even remember him.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know. So that could have been a payoff right there, but I didn't even remember the fact that he existed.
And his death was so sort of inconsequential and just sort of
matter of fact,
sad and by this off to the side, you know, like not really part of the story.
Could I ask you a question? So
yes.
Going into a series like this, you're obviously looking forward to it, and you're obviously looking forward to the horror, the screams, the blood and guts, maybe, because that's the kind of twisted sicko you are. But how do you approach it? Like, do you try and work out the mystery as you're going? Like, are you focused on that, or are you just going along for the ride?
Bit of both. I can't help myself. I'm looking out for the telltale signs of what I expect a horror show or film to have, and those signs give me a sense of confidence that it's gonna be a good ride, right? Like when I see them, I'm like, oh yeah, there you go. That's gonna pay off later. That's gonna be good. And if I start seeing that they're not happening, then I start getting worried, you know. And then I start to lose confidence in the whole show. So for me, it's, there's a couple things. There's the mystery, what the unique twist is going to be on this particular version of the haunted house story, or the monster in the house, you know, theme that you get so often. And then whether or not the filmmaker's nailing things, like, is the vibe of it all right? Are we claustrophobic and close enough and tight enough and just worried about what's around every corner? Is the house the sort of place that I could imagine this all unraveling? You know, like all those details are kind of what I love about these shows.
Did you have theories about it? Like, I know that's the way I approach these things. I'm always just trying to work the bloody thing out and get inside their head rather than caring about I don't really care so much. I'm just trying to outwit them somehow. I don't know what that says about me.
That's funny.
But I was having theories all along, and some were right, some were wrong. But did you know where it was going in the early days?
I think I did. So I think I had a pretty good idea where it was heading. I picked the lady in the lake from a mile away. The second they showed the lake, actually, I didn't pick. I knew there was going to be something with the well early on.
Yeah.
But I didn't pick exactly what that was, and I thought that was actually a nice little story twist that was fun. The kids, I expected, were going to be more like they would be the main people that we were worried about the whole way through, and I don't know if that's really the case. Like, I think it ended up being that you were supposed to be a bit more worried for the au pair, and yet she sort of was so unlikable in so many ways that I don't think that quite landed the way it was intended. I had a much stronger feeling towards Flora, the little girl, than the au pair, and their stories don't quite work out the way you expect they are either. So some of the stuff I picked, and some of it was a pleasant surprise. I think what got to me the most is, you've already kind of pointed it out, is that this is from an older novel. I don't know how old it is. I've got a feeling it's quite old.
I think it's the 1800s.
Yeah, it feels like it. Because there's a real quaintness to the way this story is told. It doesn't have the edginess that you get in the first season. And even from things like the voiceover and the sort of it was a great good place stuff that you get about 40,000 times throughout the whole show. And, you know, even to the way it was shot, like there's a sort of old-fashioned haunted house gothic horror vibe about it that I thought is a little outdated. Didn't quite work.
But then with all that memory jumping, what do they call it? Was it memory jumping? That almost seemed like Inception or The Matrix all of a sudden. So it was a real, in a way, it was a real modern twist, and I kind of liked it, but it did jar a bit too. It sounded like it was just an insertion into a modern insertion into an old thing.
Totally. So let's just talk about that for a moment. So one of my favorite episodes, I know we're jumping around a little bit here, but one of my favorite...
That's in keeping.
That's just what we do, right?
No, in keeping with the,
show.
With the show.
One of my favorite episodes was episode 5. And that is the episode where Hannah, the gardener, we get her backstory and we discover how she died. And the thing...
No, hang on. Hannah, the...
not gardener, sorry. Did I say gardener?
The governess.
The governess, that's right.
No, not the... Is she the governess?
I don't know. She's like the housekeeper, yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever they call the housekeeper in those days.
Yeah.
So, but she... Two things. She's a great actress. She was in Years and Years that I saw recently, which was a fantastic show. She's a great actress. She does a great job with her role, even though I think she's got a tough gig there because playing someone who's always sort of in almost like a dementia state is tough, right? There's a great twist, as you were saying, to the story where suddenly we discover that when she's having these little kind of zone out moments, she's actually skipping off to a different memory from a different time completely. And it's because at the very beginning of the season, episode 1, when the au pair arrives and Hannah's looking down the well, that's actually moments after she's died by being pushed into the well. And so everything that happens after that is just her sort of reliving parts of her past and then jumping back to the present, and it all happens just randomly, seemingly. I just thought I bought in entirely into that episode. And I think by that point, I was so tired of everything else that had happened that was just such a fresh breath of fresh air for me.
I wasn't as tired by that point. I was enjoying it. But that episode was just killer. It was the standout to me as well. And I can almost pinpoint the moment, and that's when she was in a memory with Owen, the cook.
Yes.
And the line was something like, "Haven't we done this before?"
It was beautiful.
And I jumped up and down. I loved it. I thought, okay, this is the missing ingredient. And I also liked when it was revealed when they do sort of fall back into memories, they're kind of being inhabited by someone else.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure maybe with her story.
Yeah.
Because with the kids, that's definitely what's happening. They're being possessed and they're getting tucked away, as little Flora says, which I think is a cool idea. Tucked away into a memory while they're being possessed. With her, I'm not sure exactly why she's jumping around, other than I get this feeling that when people die, they slowly start to lose who they are at the manor. And for her, it seems to be happening quite quickly.
Yeah, and this is where the logic of the whole thing breaks down for me, I guess, because even though I just sounded like I thought I got it then, I didn't. And as it goes on, you're seeing that people, like, can they be seen or not? You know, these dead people. And if they can be seen, you should walk into Danny should have walked in, and it should have just been like a party of ghosts that she just sees there in front of her.
Great point. Like, why are some ghosts sort of just visible to everyone all the time and others not? That's a great point. Yeah, never really explained. That moment that you're talking about with Owen and where he first says, "Haven't we done this before?" or she does, whichever way it goes, it was brilliant. I just thought that was so great. And it gave me some hope. It sort of that the season was going to take a new direction. And it doesn't really. It sort of does for that episode, and then it sort of veers back onto its original trajectory after that.
It was like the moment in, I think it's Lost Highway by David Lynch, where the guy says, "I'm in your house," or something like that. Do you remember that?
I can't remember that. I know I've seen it, but it's been a long time.
I might be getting it wrong, but a memorable moment for me.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it was so good. Were there any other, I mean, I've got another one, but were there any other great sort of standout moments for you in the season?
I thought in general, the kids were really compelling to watch. I thought their performances were great throughout and subtle. When they gave that storytelling moment where they came down the stairs and Miles in particular was telling a story about being controlled by puppets, or I can't remember what it was, but they're great little actors, and they carried a lot of the film for me.
They had to too. They had to as well. Like, could you imagine the stress of casting this film? You got to go to England. So you're Mike Flanagan. You're an American actor. You've kind of got director. You've got your sort of cast of people that you use a bit. Now you got to go to England, and you got to find some English actors, and in particular, 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And one of them's got to be around 8, and the other one's got to be around sort of 11 or so. And they have to be able to pull off this, where they're not only playing themselves and their own characters, but particularly Miles, the boy, is also playing he's playing the possessor at the same time, who's a totally different character and has this sort of nasty edge to him. I totally agree. I think the both of them did. Those kids were just great. Yeah. But can I just say one thing about the actors though, in general, just a broad statement. The English actors in this show ran circles around the American actors in this show.
Completely agree.
And it really showed up.
Well, that's probably because, and you alluded to it, they would have cast for those actors, and they would have had an idea of what they wanted and picked someone who could embody it after an audition process, no doubt. And the other ones were relics from the first season, which was great, but they just threw them in, and I didn't think any of them really worked well, even from a look and feel perspective.
I think the guy, I should know his name, I was just blanking on it, the guy who's the kid from E.T., is a strange-looking dude. Like
Henry Thomas.
Henry Thomas. Everything I've seen him in, I remember thinking exactly the same thing in season 1. And in Gerald's Game, I think he was, he played like the dad in Gerald's Game as well. He's just a weird looking dude, and there's something creepy about him, which is maybe one of the reasons why Mike Flanagan likes him. But it doesn't, he's not creepy in the right way. Like, he's creepy in like a way of, I'm a little put off by his performance, and I don't really know why, you know?
Yeah, I felt that all through the first season of Hill House, and then it came with me in this as well. But in the first season, I think I liked it that he was weird. And in this one, when you put the accent on top of it, that was an odd accent he was giving.
Very. It's like he decided that the way to do that sort of posh English accent was to say everything in half speed as well. Like everything was super drawn out and slow.
Can we talk about just briefly about his character though? So let's forget about the performance.
Yeah.
And I felt that was leading somewhere. You had his character was quite mysterious, and suddenly he had a double on his shoulder, like a little demon that was, his evil self or something.
Yes.
You wondered, is that a ghost? Is he dead or alive? He then essentially dies at the end and comes back, but none of it made any sense. None of it had any point.
No, that storyline had no point made no sense. It had nothing to do with the logic of the rest of the world. He has really very little connection to the house and the kids itself. For some reason, his brother is able to sort of meet him at the office, suggest to him that he's got an evil little spirit inside of him, and the guy, that's enough. That suggestion is enough to make the evil spirit appear. And that's it. It's got nothing else to do with whether or not he died at Bly Manor or the curse of the Lady of the Lake. Like, it really has nothing to do with any of the rest of it.
No, it's not even worth spending any more time on, to be honest, given there's so much happening.
Yeah.
Similar storyline with Danny, the housekeeper, and her backstory, including the fiance that died and is haunting her. Did you find any relevance or hope in that storyline? Like, did you buy into that?
Sorry, Danny, the au pair.
The au pair.
I thought she was the weakest character of them all, actually, in the end. She was so weak that she kind of reminded me of Shelley Duvall's character from The Shining, but not even in a good way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Shelley is kind of weak and annoying in that role in a great way, in that it sort of gives you a reason to almost barrack for Jack Torrance at the same time as kind of feeling uncomfortable with the whole thing. But this character, like, she just annoyed me so much, and she never did anything, you know? Right. It's just, she sort of, she could have, they could have given her a bit more backbone. They could have made her a little more interesting, and they could have made her whole story kind of add up to a little more by the end of it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Although that said, it was her story ultimately. And especially when you get towards the end, when the last episode is all about her.
Yes.
Is it not?
Yeah.
Maybe before we get to the last episode, should we talk about the second last episode? I think you and I had already kind of lost it by then, but then we introduced episode 8, and it's a completely different style, a new story altogether. Episode 7 ended on quite a cliffhanger when the lady in the lake sort of had the au pair by the throat, was about to kill her from memory.
That's right.
And then it was late at night when we were watching it, and we just said, no, we've got to watch another one. And
what happens next?
What happens next? And then we get this black and white, episode. What did you make of that?
So I will say that episode 8 was my second favorite episode of the whole thing.
Interesting.
But for some reasons, I loved it for some reasons, and there's other reasons that things in there that I didn't love. But I thought that what we were doing finally, when we took that turn to black and white, and finally the backstory of the Lady of the Lake, right, is we were getting that quaint gothic horror storytelling through and through. Like, they finally went at, like, if we're going to do this, which is pretty much what we were dabbling with the rest of the show, let's just go full tilt. Let's just do gothic horror storytelling the way it's always been told. It'll be heavy narration. It'll be full of basically the setup of this young couple with all the promise in the world, and it'll have a love triangle and all that stuff, and a classic curse that's gonna come to kind of take this couple down. And I actually really enjoyed all of that. I thought it was really fun, and you don't see it too often these days, so I kind of went for the ride. How about you? What did you think?
I thought it was okay. I felt like we were going somewhere else, and I really loved the characters in the house, like in the present or the 80s or whenever it was. The gardener, the cook, Hannah Gross. I liked that scene, and to get, when I thought it was coming to this climactic moment, to have to slow down. I didn't really buy. I found it frustrating. I liked the idea of it, but when it went for the full episode, it wore me out. I found the narration overbearing. I thought she slept, she waited, she walked.
I knew you were going to say that.
If it was said once or twice, I would have dug it. But I wanted to throw something at the TV by the end of that.
So that's where it starts to fall apart. And I think you're right. I think it should have been half an episode, and then brought us back to the moment with the hand on the throat and Danny's potentially going to die. It went too long, but I still think the setup and the shift in tone was good. Maybe not the second last episode. Like, that's maybe it came too late in the show. Like, it, because I agree, you're getting to a climax of the show here, and then it slows everything right down again, and basically delivers to you a whole new self-contained horror story within itself. That feels like maybe that should have been a couple episodes from the end,
or interspersed. Like you get little snippets of it throughout. I don't know how that would work structurally, but I felt too much at once was just overload when I wasn't in that headspace. But like you, I really did enjoy understanding the backstory and the motivation. And one thing I liked was that it revealed there wasn't really any true evil in this setup. So it wasn't like, a demon, Satan or something possessing people. It was real people with real human motivations and regrets and
that's a great
hang-ups. So that episode really bore that out, that you actually you got inside, and this is rare, really, to really get inside the faceless ghost.
I agree. I think that is one of the strengths of it, totally, and very rare. You almost never get that. And sometimes people would say, well, you don't want to do that. And I think maybe in films, that's usually the case. But I think in a TV show where you've got 9 episodes or more to delve into a ghost story, then you kind of expect to get more of the backstory. So, I mean, one of the things that's classic in all these shows is that you get an episode per character almost. That's just almost the formula, right? I found that a little bit annoying in this show because, and I think the only reason it was annoying was because we didn't have enough ongoing threat, or like a rise in tension happening across the whole season. If they had just nailed that, got that right, then I think all these little forays off into the other characters would have been totally fine.
Yeah, agree. If you'd had a moment like Hannah Gross's, where she's in the dream every episode, even though that's not a ghost story one, typically, but something to make you fall off the chair every episode, that would have been enough.
That's right. You just need oh holy shit moment, like every episode. You need 1 or 2 of those. That's how these things work.
There were a few good ones. I liked the early days when they locked her in the cupboard, locked the governess au pair in the cupboard, sort of.
Yes, I agree. I was expecting something more to happen. There.
Yeah,
that would have been great. I agree. I think the moment where what's his name, Peter, the kind of conniving dude, gets his neck snapped just out of nowhere, like he's halfway through a sentence, I think, and and suddenly the woman in the lake's got him by the neck and he's done for, right? Like I think that was well done.
Yep.
What
you
else
like
was
the
good?
violence, don't you?
I like the violence. More violence, please. I really loved, and I picked what it meant straight away, but I really loved the idea of Hannah seeing the little crack in the stone everywhere. The stone.
You knew what that meant straight away?
I did. I kind of guessed. Once I saw it, I was like, oh, that's where wherever she's died, she's looking at that thing, So I picked that. But I loved it anyway. Like I thought that's the sort of great, creepy, get under your skin horror stuff that works in these sorts of shows.
I got a kick out of that when it was revealed. So I had no idea. I was thinking something like there's I thought of the Leonard Cohen song where the lyrics are, there's a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. So I felt it, that something's cracked and we're going to get a mystery solved, but not.
Oh, that's great.
Not how cool it finally got revealed. That was really good.
Yeah, I think her story is one of the strongest. I really liked her and Owen, that relationship. I thought was great. I thought that Peter and Miss Jessel, just that storyline, I just didn't feel very much for them at all. It just didn't really work for me. Maybe and speaking about relationships, towards the end when the au pair and the gardener get together and they have that little moment of like, can we escape and have a life, but that eventually the lady in the lake's going to resurface. Like I thought that was good. That's classic horror stuff and it was done well.
Yeah. What I didn't like was in that episode where I think it's the last episode, there was a bit where they said, I know we can't technically get married, sort of dealing with the issue of gay marriage. I support the issue, but to have that inserted,
right,
just made me feel odd. Like I don't want a political message so overtly. Like they've made the point in the relationship, and it doesn't need to be spelled out.
It doesn't need to be said. You're right. Yeah. So I think what I admire is that the show was attempting to have heart, and there is a lot of heart in there within the sprinkled throughout the episodes. Works in some of the relationships, probably doesn't so much in others. But like I respect that attempt. I think in season 1 though, like man, that just the whole family relationship dynamic was so solid. Like while I was watching this show, I was sort of struggling with the fact that I'd seen such a great show in The Haunting of Hill House. Same creator had then gone and made this season, and I couldn't really line them up aside from it's another haunted house show and there's some of the same actors in there. I'm not seeing too much of the same creator. aside from some of the things maybe in the first season that bothered me a little bit, just this slightly overly slick camera work, and maybe he has a tendency towards melodrama and a little bit of a tendency towards making almost like that Blumhouse style of horror film that's just a little bit too overly produced. Like it just looks, the lighting just looks a little too Hollywood or something, and it's got, there's a little bit too many filters on the camera, on the lens, and just some of that kind of pulls you out of the horror a little bit. That stuff got worse in season 2 rather than better. Like instead of refining it in a better way, it's almost like the refinement pushed it further into that kind of whatever that is.
No, I quite liked that in the first season. I thought it did take you out of the typical horror genre, but in a way that made it more terrifying, that you weren't looking like a typical horror film. So I liked it, but completely agree in this one. They just didn't come together.
After episode 1, I was watching episode 1 and feeling really gross about the cinematography, and I was Googling while I was watching it, going like
as you would do in a cinema. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to figure out what filters they had used on the camera to make it look like that. It's like a Days of Our Lives sort of glowy glamour filter of some sort that was just so heavy in this season. And what came up was an article from the cinematographer talking about how a look had been established in season 1 and he was trying to replicate it. And so I was like, but no, season 1 didn't look like this. So then I went back and looked at season 1 a little bit afterwards, and like it's there a little bit, but it's done tastefully. It's not pushed too far. And in this, it's just too much.
Yeah, I think it's only the filmmakers that might have picked that up.
Okay, probably.
What else have we got before we go on to that, to what it reminds us of? Any other points?
I think I've spoken about everything that I wrote down.
No, I haven't either. I talked about predictions early in the season. I think it was episode 2. I said, yeah, they're all dead or something like that. But then that's probably not too hard to think of. But my guess at the time was that the au pair was dead, the cook was dead, and the gardener was dead. And I wrote down that maybe the housekeeper and the kids are alive. So I got it all wrong. I got it all wrong. So the housekeeper was dead and all the others were alive. So
I love it. I
thought I was smart picking this trend and just completely stuffed it.
Well, that's great. No, I had definitely had a moment of everyone's dead as well a couple times. I was watching this with Edith, and she was not a fan from the start.
Oh, really?
And she kept saying, I'm not going to color your thinking about this, but I could hear her like sighing next to me. and
from early on.
Yeah, from early on. She lost patience with it really quickly, but she stuck through it with me. It's
a sign of a good relationship.
I know, right? We were back and forth on after each episode, like, oh, what do you think that means? Who's alive? Who's dead? And there were many moments where I was like, I just think they're all dead. Like, what else can be going on here? This is so strange. Which is good, I think. That's good if you're guessing and second guessing the whole way through.
I enjoy that, and for that reason, it sort of had me on the journey for a little longer than you. What did it remind you of, Baron?
So I was reminded of a few things. Obviously, I was reminded of how not like Hill House it is, which I've talked about a bit. But let me I guess one thing about Mike Flanagan is, because I have so much respect for the filmmaker, I think he's doing a lot, right? But I also have noticed with him that he will make a film or a show that I think is great, and then he will make one that I think is not great. And I put that down to experimenting. Maybe there's a bit of a taste element there. I don't know. Who really knows? But I was very much reminded of the studio Blumhouse. That studio creates a lot of horror films, and there's a real sense of experimenting that goes on with that studio, and you'll get a great one every now and again, and then you'll get some doozies as well. So I was actually thinking, like, I was thinking about Blumhouse quite a bit, and just how it can go right and it can go wrong quite easily with the genre.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of Trauma, Trauma films.
Yeah.
Which that's quite a few rungs below, but how they're all pretty crappy because they're just big, usually early career filmmakers. But then occasionally you get one that rocks.
Exactly, and I suppose that's part of that. That's become part of the genre. And I don't think it should be necessarily part of the genre, but it's just the way the cookie crumbles. Any for you?
Yeah, not heaps. I think you might have more than me on this one, but probably an obvious one is The Others, with Nicole Kidman and co. And
it's on my list as well.
Okay, well, that's for the simple reason that the reveal is that they're all dead, basically.
Yeah.
So it had a similar vibe of walking around a house in a ghostly state.
The Others is a perfect example of a gothic horror film. It's just beautifully done. And the ghost story elements are so well handled. The characters are just completely rock solid, beautifully acted. So like, I think if you're going to have one of these, and when I think about the perfect version of what one of these looks like, it's pretty much The Others or something, similar to that. I guess in the same vein, I'm just going to talk a couple of big themes, but in the same vein as Blumhouse, I was thinking about Stephen King films a little bit. And in recent years, we've had a huge increase in Stephen King films coming out, and Netflix is one of the places where they sort of surface quite a bit. In fact, I've got a friend who's made a Stephen King film that's on Netflix.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just one of those things that's starting to happen. I think as he's getting older, he's accelerating the number of films that he's greenlighting or saying, yes, you can go make that. But some great ones, things like The Mist, I really liked. Obviously there's The Shining, which is, a classic, but you also get just some real doozies. And every year now you're getting a handful of Stephen King films that come out, and there'll be one or two solid ones in there, and then a few that don't really work as well. But Mike Flanagan's made a couple, and one of them he made was Dr. Sleep, which is the sequel to The Shining. Which I actually didn't mind. I thought he did a decent job. And then on the other hand, there's Gerald's Game, which while I kind of enjoyed it because I always have a bit of fun with these films, is just nowhere near as good as maybe it could have been. So yeah, I was thinking about that the whole way through as well.
Yeah, I've never read a Stephen King novel, but the stories are just so ripe for the picking, aren't they? And when you've got to get a movie up traditionally is so difficult, and you can imagine why perhaps there haven't been so many, even though there's been heaps. But now that we've got this Netflix thing and the streaming, and you can serialize them, it's just so perfect. It's like his time to shine.
Absolutely. And I should just mention my friend, his name is Zach Hilditch, and the film he did was 1922. That's on Netflix.
Great. I'll have to watch it.
Yeah, did a good job. Any other remind me ofs for you?
I've got a couple of others. One is, it's hardly a reminds me of because it's quite a straight reference to this. It's another short story or novella by Henry James, which is called The Beast in the Jungle. And episode 9 is actually called The Beast in the Jungle. So they're not hiding the reference at all, and essentially the storyline is that of a guy who thinks he's been fated to have some catastrophe happen in his life, and he meets this woman who intoxicates him, and he falls in love with her, but he's afraid to get too involved, afraid to marry, because he thinks it's doomed, in exactly the same way, like it's exactly the same way as Danny is sort of kind of pushing her gardener lover away all the time. That novella really moved me at the time. I just bloody loved it. So the fact that it was reworked in this, part of me really liked, but the other part thought, no, I was on another journey. Like I was on another journey for 7 episodes. You've already taken me off script in episode 8. Yes. I don't need another another one in episode 9. Like,
Yeah.
I could do a whole season of that story. It's a great story, but not just inserted at the end when I really wanted other things to pay off.
Yeah, well, that novella sounds great. Sounds sounds really good.
It's a quick read, and it's worth it.
You just reminded me. There's The Changeling is probably one of just the classic older haunted house films that people reference. So that one definitely popped into my mind while I was watching this.
What's the premise of that? I think
it's been a little while since I've seen it, but it's a classic. You know, of people living in a house where there's a spirit, and that one a little bit, if I'm trying to remember now, it's a little bit more like The Exorcist in that you've got a man that kind of can do something about trying to get rid of the evil, and it's more of his fight to remove the evil from the house. Again, it's been a while since I've seen it, but definitely popped into mind.
We'll wrap it up shortly, but
yeah,
one that we've looked at recently, and I think I've given it as a reference for other things, is I'm thinking of ending things.
Really?
Because in both, it's quite a good one, really, because in both the characters are trapped in a memory loop, so they're just shaking around between different times and different memories, which completely different genres, completely different executions, but essentially the same idea.
Last one for me is American Horror Story. So it's just another anthology series, but in particular, season 1 is just an old creepy manor style house filled with different ghosts. And, the idea of all the different ghosts that live in different rooms and parts of the building that you might come across, and each have their own backstory is cool. And I think it can be done really well, even though I don't think it was done that well in this, because, half the ghosts just are sort of like side notes in the end.
I think that's a really good one, because that's probably the closest of any as to what it is. And perhaps the fact that American Horror Story exists is one of the things that maybe leaves this one a bit wanting, because there's nothing surprising about that.
Yeah, exactly. And the success of American Horror Story, I think we're up to like season 9 or something now. Is what's probably made shows like this possible. If that hadn't gone gangbusters the way it had, it would be a lot harder to get one of these up and running.
Yeah, that's true. Last one from me, and that's it. And that is a really quick mention of the opening titles, where you've got all the pictures, and it starts, all the paintings. They've got the young faces, and then they sort of dissolve into their old faces. And that reminded me of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, a play that I might even have mentioned that one before too.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, that is a killer play. Highly recommend. But should I spoil this for you? I don't know.
Go for it.
Okay, if someone hasn't watched or read Picture of Dorian Gray, don't listen. This guy gets a picture taken, a portrait done of him, and basically as he becomes he starts doing evil deeds in his life, but his face remains beautiful, so he has his youth, but the painting gets old.
Ooh.
So he puts it in the cupboard, never looks at it, and then after years looks at it, and it's just really decrepit. And
that's a cool premise.
It's one of the best premises, but it seems a very clear reminds me for the titles.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I'm not familiar with the play, but that's a great premise.
I think we're done.
I think we're done.
That was 9 episodes crammed in one. I think we did okay.
Yeah, I think we missed tons of stuff in this little wrap up, but then again, who cares? We did all right, I think. I think we got the main points in.
Cool. Well,
and people should go and watch it for themselves and see what they think, because, there are things to like and not like. And I think overall, people are generally liking this, having a look at some of the reviews. So,
and you know what? If you're trying to find something to watch, I would still recommend watch it. Like it's an enjoyable ride. What else are you going to do when you're locked down?
Yeah, although there are no lack of amazing shows at the moment. We are pretty spoiled for choice right now.
Well, until next week.
All right, cool. Catch you later.
See ya.